Hey guys, back with another Fuji rumor video, and today's topic is the X-H2. Now this camera is supposed to drop in 2022, and if you're not familiar with the X-H line of cameras, the X-H1 dropped in, I think, 2018, and it was Fuji's real first attempt in a video-centric camera. They even commissioned people from the DP review team to do a short film or short video using it. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't a great seller for Fuji. Good camera. I kind of wish I would have picked one up myself when they had a clearance. I jumped in a little too late and missed the deal because they were like liquidating these things for $9.99. But the X-H1 was a very big camera for an APS-C size camera, in my opinion. Full grip. It had a top readout for your aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And it had the first Fujifilm IBIS, or in-body stabilization. It was their first camera. They came out with the film simulation, Eterna. That's what it is, Eterna. But again, it didn't sell very well. It came out, it had a very weak or very small battery. They used a legacy battery that they used in pretty much all of their cameras up until that point. And with the IBIS, it even made the battery worse. So there's a lot of drawbacks to that camera. The IBIS was okay. You couldn't use it for handheld video. It was kind of wonky. But the biggest problem with the X-H1 wasn't necessarily the X-H1 itself, but rather the Sony a7 III. Now, the X-H1 was a APS-C camera that did 4K video, had IBIS, but about the same time. I can't remember if the Sony came before the Fuji X-H1 or vice versa, but that camera dropped just under $2,000 and really shocked a lot of people. It was a full frame camera that Sony really didn't hold too many stops on. Yes, they held back on the resolution and the LCD and the viewfinder, but pretty much everything else they gave it to everybody. A full frame camera, it had 4K video, a huge battery, and it was just a great camera for the money. But it really overshadowed in a huge way the X-H1. So again, it didn't do well. And then soon after the X-H1, Fuji released yet another camera, the Fujifilm X-T3, that had 4K 60 and everything that the X-H1 had and more. So in my opinion, the X-H3 was the real first attempt, serious attempt in the video world. A lot of videographers love and still love to this day the X-T3, not the X-H1, but the X-T3, because once you pair that thing with a video rig and you plug in an external battery, the optics, and especially if you're using manually focus, and I'm talking the serious guys video, not me and others like me where I just want it to trust the autofocus. No, I'm talking about the serious guys that are doing manual focusing, and the X-T3 just had great video results. And then obviously there's the X-T4 that they made some improvements with the IBIS and some other things. So it's been since 2018. This is going on 4 years, and the X-H1 just kind of fizzled away. And I think Fujifilm has learned their lesson. And if they do, and every rumor that I've seen as of lately, it's going to be coming out in 2022. But I don't think they're going to make those same mistakes. I really think that they're going to come at it strong, and Fuji's really good about kind of brushing themselves off, learning from how they fell the first time, and correcting. Now, the X-H2, I think it's going to be a little bit of a smaller camera. I don't think they're going to come out with a huge body like they did last time. Will they use the same larger battery in the X-T4? Probably. I'd like to see them even do a bigger battery, but they'll probably use the same battery, because if you are serious, needing some serious battery power, I'm sure it'll have a grip. You put 2 or 3 of these batteries, the X-T4 batteries, it should handle all your electronic needs or electricity needs of that camera. But I think we're also going to see a improved IBIS, hopefully. And then the interesting part of this rumor says not 1, but 2 X-H2s will be released. I don't see Fuji splitting off into photography and video, having one camera like the A7R and the A7S series camera, one for photography, one for video. I don't see that. So I'm really not sure where Fuji's going with this two different models or SKU numbers of the X-H2. We'll have to kind of wait and see what materializes. But let's take a look at some of the other specs. Again, there's not a whole lot out here. This camera is rumored to shoot 8K DCI UHD video. Not too many people are getting excited about 8K, myself included. I think most people want a good clean 4K 60, and then a 120 or even 240 would be ultimately cool to get that slow-mo B-roll. But 8K, most people aren't shooting 6K, and if you're shooting like a high-end production, you're not using Fujifilm or any consumer-grade camera. So I think it's more of a spec thing just to compete with Canon. As far as price point, it should be under $2,500, but quite honestly, I don't know how Fuji or anybody else could sell a APS-C camera higher than $2,500. Quite honestly, this camera should be priced around $2,000 or less, in my opinion, because there's so many great full frame options, and sensor size does matter, folks, and we'll get to the sensor in a second. So as far as price point, I'd be a little bit disappointed if it's $2,500. I'd more like it to be around $2,000. And lastly, this will be the first camera in the X series lineup to get the new sensor and processor. Not a whole lot of information on the processor, probably next gen, faster and all that, but the new sensor. This will be supposedly rumored an X-Trans 40 megapixel BSI backside-sided illuminated stacked sensor. That's a mouthful, right? So I'll attempt to break this down for you at a high level, but if you want more details, I recommend you do a Google search. There's just a ton of information out there. So X-Trans versus Bare. Now, most sensors out there are Bare sensors. So I'm not sure if... So I'll attempt to break this down for you at a high level, but if you want more details, I recommend you do a Google search. There's just a ton of information out there. So X-Trans versus Bare. Now, most sensors out there are Bare sensors. Fuji owns the patent on the X-Trans sensor, but they're the only company that I'm aware of that uses it, and they don't even use it in all their cameras. My understanding is that the GFX is a Bare array, as is their lower cameras. They are all using Bares. And what's the big difference? Let's take a look at the photo. On the left, you'll see the Bare. It's very even. You have the green, blue, and then the next row is red, green, and you'll see that repeat for the rest of the sensor. And then on the right, the X-Trans, very, very different. They consider this a 6x6. I'm not sure why they consider it a 6x6, but you can see that you have the green, blue, red, and then like you get the stack red, blue, and then the big section of green. Why does Fuji do this? The big reason they did this is to control the moire. Moire is this optical color distortion, if you will. I'm not probably doing that justice. If you're taking a picture of patterns, say you're taking a picture of a polka dot dress, or another one would be a man's shirt that's very checkboxy, like a flannel shirt, you'll get a lot of color shifts. And in order for the camera manufacturers to handle those color shifts, they do what they install on top of the sensor, what's called a low pass filter. And Fuji, with this X-Trans layout, they can handle the moire with the color filter array pattern, and they can omit that low pass filter. Now, they're the only APS-C camera that I'm aware of that omits that low pass filter. There's other full frame cameras, usually only in the higher megapixel. For some reason, if you have a full frame camera that's like an A7R, it omits that color low pass filter because it does it probably optically. I'm not sure, but on the super high resolution cameras, they omit the color array and they can still control moire. Not so much on lower megapixel. And again, it's the only sensor that I know of in the APS-C size that omits it. Again, it gives you much more sharpness and image quality. The other thing that people say is that's what gives Fuji that extra pop. That's something special. I'm not sure. I'm torn on this one myself, because when I look at my Fujifilm pictures, I think they do have a little something special. They do have a little, special color pop. But when I do a side-by-side blind comparison between, say, my Fuji pictures and my Sony pictures, I can't really tell a difference. Often I'll pick the Sony pictures. So when you do a blind study, I'm leaning towards it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. So that's the X-Trans. Let's take a look at BSI, back-sided illuminated. And I think this picture does it justice. And a lot of these names, these acronyms that these camera manufacturers come up with, it really just states what it is, backside illuminated. And you can see in this photo here is where they basically swapped the photodiode, I can't talk, substrate with the metal wiring. And that allows more efficient and effective illumination of the sensor. So you don't get any better image quality, but you usually, and I stress this, usually get either high dynamic range, low light capabilities, or both. We didn't see that with Fuji going to the backside illuminating. With the X-T2 to the X-T3, there was basically no difference. The only thing, we got 100 better native ISO, but as far as low light capability, side by side looking at the X-T2 and the X-T3, I can't tell. No difference at all, zero. But most manufacturers you can. It's not snake oil. Usually a stop and a half, but unfortunately with Fuji, we didn't see it. Good thing is they're not taking it away. They're not moving backwards, but it will have a BSI or backside illuminated. So moving to the stack part of this sensor, looking at this illustration, you can see that there's multiple layers. The sensor on the top, the RAM or memory, and then the logic substrate, which can also be the processor. The goal here is to improve the readout speed of that sensor. Most newer digital cameras have what they call an electronic or e-shutter, and what that does is it basically bypasses your normal manual shutter that opens and closes when you take a photo. Instead, it does a read across the sensor digitally, and that's the way that the video option works in your camera as well. But for photos, it doesn't work so great, especially if you're using it for things in motion. Looking at this illustration here, you can see this golfer. On the picture of the left is a conventional digital sensor. You can see the golf club, how warped it is as he's taking a swing. And this is an extreme case because a golfer is swinging very, very quickly. But on the right, you can see the Sony A9, which is a stack sensor. Again, that data is reading off of that sensor crazy fast. And if you look at his golf club, it is straight. So that's a huge advantage. Most e-shutters, because you're taking that digital readout, you're not waiting for that shutter to open close. Because if you're looking at a manual shutter, you're talking about 10, 15, probably at the top end as far as shutter speed. If you're huge into sports and wildlife, with an e-shutter, you can obtain a much higher read rate, especially if you have a fast sensor, lower megapixel, less data. And you also get no blackout. So it's basically kind of like video, but you're taking stills from it. For a portrait photographer, not going to get a whole lot of advantage, because one of the net downsides of an electronic shutter, regardless if it's stacked or conventional, is that you can't use it for flash photography. So although this new stack would be great for motion and all of that, so it could replace your conventional sensor for the most part, except for flash photography. And in that case, you still need the manual shutter. So that's it for the stacked and the breakdown of the different components of this 40 megapixel X-Trans backside illuminated stack sensor. I hope it helps you guys a little bit. I'm not overly excited about it. I don't think we need a 40 megapixel camera, at least I don't. I'm in that 2024 sweet spot myself. I'm hoping for high dynamic range, and a bump in low light improvements. We'll see. We probably won't get it, especially if it's a 40 megapixel sensor, but we'll have to wait and see. Thanks guys for watching, and have a good one. Take care. Bye.